Hi there, Flutter developers. In this video, we're going to take a look at how you can configure Supabase database and edge functions so that when a new row is inserted, we can react to that in real time and send push notifications to your users. Let's dive in. I've gone ahead and created a simple Flutter application. Users can sign in and they can purchase items from the item list. Upon pressing the purchase button, a new row is inserted into the Supabase database. The goal here is to implement a push notification feature into this app so that users can receive a push notification upon making a purchase. Let's look at the code. In the main function, we are initializing Supabase. In the material app, we have a homepage widget. The homepage widget is the only route that we have in this app. It's listening to Supabase on auth state change and displaying different pages depending on the auth state. When the user is not signed in, it's displaying a authentication widget, which is the sign in/sign up page that you see on the right. When the user is signed in, it's displaying a item list. Let's try to sign in. Now that we are signed in, it's displaying the item list. Item list widget is a simple list view builder. It has a name of the item, price of the item, and it also has a text button. Upon pressing the text button, we are inserting a new row into our Supabase database. Let me click purchase a few times so that we can insert some data into our database. Now let's take a look at our Supabase dashboard to see what tables we have. We have two tables. We have an orders table and a profiles table. In the orders table, we have a list of orders created by the users by pressing the purchase button. We have the order ID, the user ID of the order, item name, and the price. In the profiles table, we have an ID column and an FCM token column. The ID column holds the user ID, and the FCM token holds the Firebase Cloud Messaging token generated by the user. Now let's get started with setting up Firebase Cloud Messaging. Now you might be thinking, I thought this was a Supabase channel, why are we talking about Firebase? Well, it turns out that in order to send push notifications to Android apps that are distributed through Google Play, it is a requirement for the push notification to be sent through FCM. Similarly, in order to send push notifications to iOS devices, we need to go through APNS. Because FCM is a wrapper of APNS, FCM becomes a viable option for Flutter developers to send push notifications with. Our setup is going to look like this. We insert a new row into the database from our Flutter app. That's going to trigger a database webhook, which will call our edge functions. This edge functions will call the FCM API, and FCM will send the push notifications to our Flutter app. Now let's come back to our application and let's connect Firebase to this app. We can head over to Add Firebase to your Flutter app guide from Firebase. Scroll down a bit and find out that we need the Firebase CLI as well as the Flutter Fire CLI. I've got both on my machine, so I'm going to proceed. We can go ahead and run Flutter Fire configure in our app directory. Select the Firebase project that we want to connect this app to. Select the platform that we want to connect. And wait for the Firebase config file to be generated. Once the CLI is done running, we can head back to the guide and proceed to the next step, which is to install Firebase Core. We can copy this piece of code and run it in our terminal. I'm going to also add Firebase Messaging SDK here. Great, we got our dependencies ready. Now we can head back to the guide and proceed to the next step, which is to add these imports. I'm just gonna paste them up here. And next we need to initialize Firebase. I'm gonna paste it at the top of the main function. And we also need to add widgets flutter binding that ensure initialized. Now at this point we are done setting up Firebase and we can move on to setting up FCM. Head over to the official FCM guide for Flutter, and here we just have a few steps for iOS but nothing further for Android. Let's open up Xcode in our app. And first select the development team. And then we can add the necessary capabilities. First, we can add push notifications. And then also add background modes. Within background modes, we can check background fetch and remote notifications. And that's it for setting up Xcode. Head back to the guide and check the final step, which is to upload the APNS authentication key. We can generate a key from our Apple Developers portal. Give some name and make sure to tick the Apple Push Notification service. Hit continue and register. We can then download the authentication key file. We can then head over to our Firebase project dashboard, go to project settings, cloud messaging, and upload the authentication key that we just got. We can get the key ID from Apple Developer Portal right here, and the team ID from the top right corner up here. And we are done setting up FCM for iOS. Now let's set up FCM within our Dart code. Let's request FCM permission when the user signs in into our app. We can make the homepage stateful and add init state. Within the init state, we are going to listen to the Supabase auth state change. When the sign-in event has occurred, we are going to request the FCM permission. We can await for the permission, make the function async, and call Firebase messaging.instance.requestPermission. Now, before requesting the FCM token, there's an additional step that we need to take for supporting iOS. We need to make sure that get APNS token has completed. And with that, we can finally request the FCM token. Make sure that we did get the FCM token. Once we have the token, we can store it in our Supabase database profiles table. We can use the upsert method to insert or update our table. We can pass the user's user ID as the ID column. Fetch the user ID up here. And we can also store the FCM token that we just obtained. Lastly, let's also listen to token refresh and make sure to save the updated FCM token whenever the FCM token updates. And we can extract this FCM storing logic into its own function. We can call it setFCMToken. Paste the chunk of code we have. And we can call setFCMToken within the listen. We probably should rename this to FCM token as well. And also call setFCMToken after we get the initial FCM token up here. Because we install packages that have platform-specific codes, we have to stop the debug session and restart it again. While that's going on, let's add a null check here for user ID. Because we are already signed into the app, and since we're only requesting the FCM permission upon sign-in, we need to be able to sign out first. So let's add a logout button. It'll be a simple icon button in the app bar. We can just call supabase.auth.signout here. We can await the function and make the function async. Now that the app has rebooted, let's sign out and sign in again. Enter the email address and my super secure password. And we have the pop-up requesting push notification permission to the user. Upon granting permission, we should see the FCM token in our Supabase dashboard, so let's go back and take a look. And there it is, our FCM token is right there. Let's copy this, go to the Firebase dashboard and test it out. Go to Engage and Messaging, and click Create Your First Campaign. Choose Firebase Notification Message, and give it a title and a body. Then click Send Test Message. Paste the FCM token. Also, we have to go back and make sure the app is in the background. Let's hit Test. Go back to the app quickly and see that we received the notification. Awesome! Now that we have set up FCM properly, let's add a feedback so that the users can see the notification even if the app is in the foreground. Using the Firebase messaging.onMessage, We can listen to notifications coming into the app even if the app is in the foreground. Let's get the notification object from the payload. Make sure the notification is not null, and show a snack bar when the notification is there. We can simply display a text widget with the title and the body of the notification. Great, we are done setting up the snack bar. Now let's move on to setting up our edge function so that we can automate setting push notifications. Run Supabase init to initialize Supabase, and then create our functions with the Supabase functions new with the function name, in this case order confirmation. Let's also link this project to our remote Supabase project. We can go get the Supabase reference from the URL and pass it to the Supabase link command. We also need a database password, which we can reset from the dashboard. Let's copy the password, paste it over, and our project is linked. Now let me get organized over here. Let's open the function file under Supabase functions. We can call Dino initialize workspace to set up Dino in this project. If you don't see Dino initialize workspace, go ahead and download the Dino VS Code extension. Let's first define a few data types. The order interface with ID string, profile ID string, name of string, and price of number. Because this function is going to be called from a database webhook, we can define the incoming request object as well. Call a webhook payload, and type is going to be insert, table is going to be string, record is going to be order, schema is going to be public, and I guess we could include the old record object here since it exists, but since we are only using the insert database webhook, it'll always be null here. We can then move on to creating the Supabase client. But first we need to update create client in our imports. We can import create client from npm @supabase/supabase.js. And we want the version 2 of it. Now we can properly call create client. We can get the Supabase URL from the environment variable. And we can also get the service role key from the environment variable. We are using the service role key here because we want to bypass role level security in this environment. Now let's go on to the actual function definition. Let me just do a cleanup here, and let's first get the payload. We can get the database webhook payload by calling request.json. Once we have the payload, let's access the database to retrieve the FCM token of the user. We can call supabase.from and query the profile table and select the FCM token. We can also chain a EQ filter to target the user that triggered this database webhook. And then lastly, we can chain .single because we know that there's gonna be only one data that's returned from this query. We can store the FCM token in a variable here. Now we can call the FCM API to trigger the push notification. We can use fetch to make the API request. Pass the endpoint for the FCM API v1 and make it a post request. We need to pass in some headers. The content type will be application JSON. And for authorization, we need to pass in the bearer token. Now we don't have the access token or the project ID in the endpoint, but let's not worry too much about it and proceed. In the body, we'll construct the main notification object. Inside message, we can pass in the token, which is the FCM token, in the notification object. We can give it a title, saying something like order confirmation, in the body. Saying something like your item name purchased for X amount of dollars. Now, once everything's looking fine, let's do some very basic error handling. We can get the response object into a variable and check the status code of the response. If the status code is not in the 200s, we can throw an error. We can also return the response data from this function. Now let's go back to taking care of the access token up here. First, we generate a service account key from Firebase. Head over to Settings, Service Accounts, click the Generate New Private Key button. We can then take the generated service account private key, drop it in under Functions, move it up here into our Functions folder, rename it to serviceaccount.json, and make sure to add it to our gitignore file. Then we can dynamically import the service account JSON file within our function. Store the result in service account variable, await import, and provide the path to the service account.json file. Make sure to pass in the type JSON. Now the service account variable here contains all the information that was present in the JSON file, so we can pass the project ID to the endpoint. Now all we need is an access token. And it's a bit complicated, so I'm gonna create a separate function for that. Name it getAccessToken. We can define the function all the way down here. We can do some cleanup and create the function here. GetAccessToken. Skip the parameters for now, and this will return a promise of string. String will be the access token. We can create a promise constructor. And first, we are creating a JWT client from the Google Auth library. But before that, we need to actually import the Google Auth library. So let's add import up here, import JWT from npm Google Auth library and version 9. Let's head back down and construct the JWT client. There's two parameters that we need. The client email and the private key, both of which are present in the service account. So we can create parameters to receive them. Call them client email and private key. Create the types for them. Client email is a string, and private key is also a string. Now for scopes, there's a value that we can find from the Firebase documentation, and that is, this one, Firebase messaging scopes. Once we have the JWT client, we can call authorize on it. Authorize will give us a callback with error and token. If the error has a value, we can throw an error. Otherwise, we can return the access token from the token object. Now we can make some adjustments up here. Make sure we await the token and pass in the two parameters, client email and the private key. Now at this point, I think this function looks good. Let's try to deploy it and see if it works. We can run Supabase functions deploy to deploy our functions to the edge. Once it's deployed, we can click this link to open the dashboard. See that our function is nice and deployed. We can actually set up the database webhooks. Go to Database, Webhooks, and Enable Webhooks. We can give it some name and select public.orders table. We want to trigger the webhook on insert, and we can select Supabase edge function to be triggered. The rest we don't need to tweak, and let's hit that create button. And with the edge functions deployed and database webhook set up, we should be able to receive a push notification when I press the purchase button right here. So let's try it out. Okay, nothing seems to be happening, but that's alright. Let's go check the logs. Head back to the Supabase dashboard, go to edge functions and click on the functions and click logs. And we see nothing here. We need to pass the no-verify-JWT flag when we deploy the function so that we can just call the function as a plain HTTP endpoint. Let's deploy again with the no-verify-JWT flag. And let's test it out again. Nothing seems to be happening. Let's check out the logs again. Okay, at least we are seeing some errors, and let's see what the error says. It says 4.1 authentication is missing. Let's go back and check the code. Go back to VS Code, close this for now, and let's see. And there's a typo in the bearer. Fix it, and let's redeploy the function. With the functions deployed, let's try it again. When I press the purchase button, we see a snack bar show up. This means that the app did receive the notification. Click it again, and we see a snack bar. Great! Let's put the app in the background and try to trigger the push notification manually. Let's head back to our Supabase dashboard and insert a row manually from the table editor. We can click Insert, New Row, give it some cool item name, give it a nice expensive price tag, and select the user to target to. Hit save and go back to the simulator. And yes, we see the notification popping up. We can confirm that it is created from the row that we just inserted. And that's how you can set up Supabase database and edge functions to send FCM notifications to your Flutter apps. The best part is, FCM is free and Supabase edge functions has a pretty generous free tier, so you can use these two in combination for free until your app grows. Now we talked about what Supabase edge functions can do in this video a little bit, but if you want to learn more about what you can do, this video right here is a pretty good starting point. Otherwise, I'll see you in another video. Bye!